Organic Lock is the strongest organic binder on the market today. Designed for stabilizing aggregate surfaces, its functionality allows you to create natural, aesthetically pleasing, permeable surfaces that hold up to extreme conditions. This webinar has been created to provide insight on what is Organic Lock, how to install Organic Lock and ensure success in your project, how to maintain an Organic Lock project, and what project options are available to you. Organic Lock is a powdered binder made from a renewable plant resource. It's designed to be blended with crushed aggregate to create natural-looking pathways and surfaces. The binder locks the aggregate in place to minimize erosion and minimize project site maintenance. It's permeable, ADA compliant, and qualifies for LEED points. The patented formula was developed from more than a decade of research by agricultural scientists from the University of Guelph as well as the Federal Research Lab at Agriculture Canada. It's been used on successful projects around the world, from the pathways at the Brooklyn Bridge Park to the Disney Amphitheater in Shanghai, China, to the Green Roof on Toronto City Hall. As the water permeates the aggregate, it gets absorbed by the Organic Lock binder and creates a gel that coats the aggregate particles. The gel expands in size and holds the aggregate particles together, which significantly reduces erosion. Once the gel forms to its maximum swell volume, it's unable to take on any new water, so the excess water passes directly through the system down into the groundwater table. Over time, the gel releases its water through evaporation into the atmosphere and through percolation into the groundwater table, recharging the system to be ready for the next rainfall. The structure of the aggregate combined with the gelling strength of the Organic Lock binder creates a stable surface that passes ADA wheelchair compliance and is suitable for a range of vehicle traffic. LEED points are available for a variety of means depending on the specifics of your project choice. Organic Lock is activated and reactivated each time it comes in contact with water, which makes for a simplified maintenance program. More than a decade of research has been completed at agricultural universities as well as federal research facilities with a focus on biopolymer sciences and their interaction with aggregates. The binding strength of Organic Lock is closely studied in the laboratory and the field for a variety of different properties. Erosion resistance, strength and stability, as well as permeability analysis are at the front lines of this testing. The core focus for the development of the Organic Lock formulation is on its ability to resist erosion due to excessive rainfall. Envirobond uses a customized rainfall simulation device that provides consistent and comparative stress to each sample studied. By preparing samples that are subjected to a controlled rainfall simulation, Envirobond researchers have been able to understand the relationship between the binding strength and its ability to resist erosion. This has led to a patented formulation making Organic Lock the strongest organic binder on the market today. Organic Lock blended aggregates derive much of their strength from the aggregate itself. The gel works best with the natural interlocking ability of well-graded crushed aggregate particles, which create an optimally structured surface. Only aggregates that meet the optimal gradation guidelines, which specify a detailed matrix of particle size distribution, are approved to become Organic Lock blended aggregates. Performing sieve analysis experiments on potential aggregates creates a strong understanding for expected performance in the field. Following these guidelines allows for a wide variety of options, taking advantage of local aggregate sources. In recent years, permeable surfaces have steadily become more relevant. Concern for the environment, especially water resources, has massively contributed to their popularity and promotion around the world. Because of this, water surface permeability is a significant issue for surface material choices. The water permeability rate of Organic Lock blended aggregate, determined by an independent ASTM standard double ring infiltrometer test, shows a rate of 0.85 to 1.2 inches per hour, allowing it to be installed in sensitive areas where water needs to get through. There are three key elements to achieve a successful installation using Organic Lock: aggregate choice, blending, and following the installation guidelines. It's always ideal and recommended to get your pre-blended organic lock aggregate from an authorized organic lock licensee. This way, you know you'll be getting an approved aggregate blended by a professional company that ensures the quality you're looking for. To find the closest licensee, you can visit our website under the Where to Buy section. If you're getting your premixed organic lock aggregate from an authorized organic lock licensee, the aggregate sourcing and organic lock blending will already have been taken care of for you. The following tips on aggregate and blending will therefore only be for additional education. In areas where an organic lock licensee is not available, it's possible to choose a local aggregate yourself, but the aggregate sourcing and subsequent blending will become your responsibility. Our team can work with you in this process, but it's important that you understand the big ticket items that you're looking for. It's important to find an aggregate that is well graded, meaning it has an even amount of each different particle size through its profile. Our design specifications include an optimal particle size distribution range that you'll want your aggregate to fall within. From a structural standpoint, you're looking for a crushed aggregate with an angular to subangular particle shape. Key spots to look for are in the fines of the aggregate, most specifically in the material passing the number 100 and 200 sieves. It's important that this material is present as the fines create the grit to ensure optimal surface area for the binder to adhere to. If you're getting your aggregate from an organic lock licensee, the material will already be coming in a pre-blended form, most likely delivered by a truck. However, if you're sourcing and blending the aggregate yourself, you'll need to know the following tips on blending. Once you have the right aggregate, you'll need to blend it with organic lock powder, which comes in 50-pound bags or 2,000-pound totes. If you're having it blended on or off-site yourself, the following are your key tips. A. Weigh the aggregate into a batch size that you plan to repeat. This allows you to use the same exact calculations each and every time. B. Organic lock is a fine powder, so precautions need to be taken to avoid loss of material as well as dust inhalation. Blend the organic lock into the aggregate at a rate of 30 to 34 pounds per ton, introducing it at a slow and methodically metered rate. C. Blend this in until you've reached a thorough and homogeneous blend. If you're questioning if you've blended it enough, keep blending. D. Once you've blended the organic lock into the aggregate, you'll move to the next step, which is the addition of water. Blending can be accomplished using many different methods. Small projects can be done with a portable concrete mixer. Portable projects can be done with a volumetric mixer or even a ready-mix truck. If you're unable to complete a mechanical blend and you have the room, bucket blending can be accomplished successfully if you have a clean pad to start with. However, extra attention needs to be taken care of here to ensure a full and homogeneous blend. A cleaned out asphalt plant can help you do large volumes. And finally, the pug mill is a metered conveyor blend and is the preferred method used by our dealers. The overall blend needs to be a thorough and homogeneous mix, with the blending times varying from method to method. The general rule of thumb here is to err on the side of over-blending. In the mixing process, the fine powder of the organic lock coats the entire profile of the aggregate. Mixing water into this pre-blended aggregate is the last step before the material can be installed. It can also be the first step when the material is delivered from a licensee, already pre-blended with the organic lock. When the aggregate material is pre-blended with organic lock, it needs to be saturated with water before it can be installed. Adding an optimal amount of moisture activates the powder into a gel that forms between the particles. To achieve the optimal water content, it's important to have an understanding of your starting moisture percentage. An appropriate ending moisture percentage will be between 8 to 10%, but is best established with a field test. The optimal way to establish ideal water content in the mixed product is with a snowball test. The snowball test is the act of picking up the blended aggregate and using both hands to firm and form a snowball. Start your first batch by adding small metered increments of water until you achieve that successful snowball. If the ball is too dry, it's going to crumble. If it's too wet, you'll see a moisture glaze or sheen, which is telling you that there's too much water. What you're looking for is that spot just after it crumbles, but before the moisture creates a sheen-type texture. Another good way to test it is the step test. Simply step on the ball you've created. On the left, you can see that the water sheen is telling you it's too wet. The goal is the sample on the right, which maintains its form but is not slick on the surface. The best thing you can do is figure out exactly the water to add on the first batch. Then, simply replicate it for each subsequent batch. If you find yourself with a batch that is too wet, the best thing you can do is add further dry material into the mix to dilute the moisture and return to a proper snowball. Now that you've got a proper aggregate, homogeneously blended with the proper amount of organic lock and water, the next step is the installation. The key elements for successful installation are overall watershed management, subgrade and base construction, surface watershed management, spreading and compaction, and finishing on the final spray for the completion of the installation. Watershed management is a simple but very important element of any successful installation. Managing the surrounding water will dictate the longevity of your surface material. As with any surface, you'll want to avoid any sitting water through proper slope management, but you also want to prevent continual flowing water in recurring and ongoing spots. This can be avoided through the use of swales, crowns, culverts, and drains in the surrounding environment. The first step of installation is to excavate and properly prepare the subgrade to be ready for the installation. Excavate the proposed area to a depth related to your installation goals, which will allow for the proper depth of base aggregate, followed by the organic lock blended aggregate. Before adding in your base aggregate, you'll need to compact the subgrade to a 95% modified Proctor density using a compactor. Once your base is compacted, you'll install your base layer at the depth required for your particular traffic type, as found in the related specifications. The base material type is listed in the specification as your region's DOT recommended crushed granular road base. An example of this would be 3/4 crusher run or granular A material, with the most important aspect being the inclusion of fines in the aggregate material itself. In situations where the base layer calls for greater than 4 inches, you need to install the base in 3-inch lifts. Be sure to apply a fine water spray in between the lifts to create cohesion while optimizing the compaction. Compaction should be done with a vibratory compactor or minimum 1-ton roller and needs to achieve that 95% Proctor density. With the successfully installed base in place, you can now install the organic lock blended aggregate. If you're installing up to 4 inches deep, you can install in one lift. If you're installing greater than 4 inches, you should do this in equal lifts with a minimum of 2.5 inches and a maximum of 4 inches per lift, with an additional soaking in between each lift. It's always important to understand the effects of Mother Nature surrounding a project. Things like topography, ground cover, and canopy cover can have significant impacts on water flow over your projected surface. It's important to guide that water flow where needed and avoid low areas, as sitting water on a pathway system is never ideal. Proper watershed management is best achieved by installing a crown or cross slope to divert the rainfall water to flow off the side of the surface. An important note is to be aware of any man-made water sources that may have an effect on the area. Things like sprinkler heads that are facing your surface can have detrimental effects with long-term pooling. It's heavily advised to adjust this flow away from the product surface. The maximum slope that is acceptable for an organic lock blended aggregate application is 20%. For slopes that are 10% or greater, we recommend installing runoff diverters, which are materials such as railway ties, metal troughs, or equivalent, embedded in the pathway at a 45-degree angle to prevent water gaining momentum, which can accelerate washout damage. To determine how much product you'll need for your project, you can use the product calculator on the organiclock.com website under the Resources tab. If you know your square footage and traffic type, just go to the Resources section and drop down to Product Calculator. Select your traffic type and enter your square footage to establish your product quantities. In order to get to the proper compacted depth, understand that the aggregate will typically compact 20 to 25% depending on aggregate type, gradation, and starting moisture content. For smaller projects or tight spaces, it's possible to use a rake and wheelbarrow to spread the aggregate. However, extra precautions should be taken to ensure depth consistency over the entire project, as man-made installations can be prone to error. On larger projects, it's ideal to spread the material using a consistent mechanical means. Although using a paving machine is going to provide the most consistent results, this may not always be available. Where this is the case, back-dragging the blended aggregate can be done with a front-end loader or a box gannon attachment. Since the material is being pulled behind machinery, there can be compaction issues as the tires drive over the material. This is something to be carefully considered and minimized wherever possible. Although there are multiple ways to spread the blended aggregate, for larger projects, the use of a paving machine such as an asphalt spreader is definitely ideal for consistency and efficiency. Using an asphalt spreader allows you to have the pre-mixed and pre-hydrated material delivered in a truck directly to the spreader. The material is dumped into the spreader where it is then dispersed at a set height on the prepared base. The asphalt spreader provides no additional compaction on the material while it moves along dispersing at a consistent depth of product. For larger projects, you can arrange larger trucks to continually feed the spreader as it moves down the installation. Because the water is already blended into the aggregate, it's immediately ready for compaction after spreading has occurred. However, if during spreading, the moisture levels of the aggregate drop because of ambient temperatures, examples of being hot or really dry days, it's advised to lightly spray the surface to increase the hydration to optimal levels before the compaction. Compaction is done with a minimum 1-ton roller. This should be a static compaction and not a vibratory one, as the vibration can disassociate the bond. If during compaction you're finding significant ruts, the material is moving around like jello, or perhaps is sticking to the roller as it moves, these are all signs of too much moisture. In this case, you should simply allow time for some of the water to evaporate out of the mixture. If it doesn't have enough moisture, you'll be seeing lines and cracks consistently throughout. To fix this, you can provide an even and light spraying of water over the areas of issue. Make 4 to 6 passes with the roller until you no longer see any lines on the surface. Pay close attention to the installation specifications to make sure you compact in lifts for any installation above 4 inches in depth. Hard to reach areas should be compacted using a hand tamper or equivalent. To complete the installation, you'll want to do your final soaking. The purpose for this is to make sure that any of the top layer material that wasn't properly hydrated gets a top-down soaking to make sure it's activated and can settle into the rest of the mixture. Last comes the curing time, or in better terms, the time before first use. This actual time depends on moisture content of the aggregate, climate, canopy cover, and the depth of the installed material. However, we generally say 24 to 72 hours is the standard, but the longer is always the better. To establish timing for first use, simply walk on the material and feel if it's firm enough to allow traffic. If the material is dry on the surface, but still feels a bit spongy below, then it's a good idea to leave cure for another day. Directly after the installation, the aggregate surface will be smooth because of the weight of the fresh compaction. As the surface weathers with traffic and time, the larger particles of the aggregate will loosen on the surface to create a natural look and feel. It's important to realize that all outdoor products require some level of maintenance analysis. The loose aggregate particles on your surface should not exceed 1/4 inch in depth. If material exceeds 1/4 inch, redistribute the particles over the entire surface, water to 1 inch depth, and compact with a roller of no less than 1,000 pounds. You can remove grass clippings, soil, debris, or organic matter by mechanically blowing or hand raking as needed. When plowing snow, use a shoe lift or rubber baffle on the blade of the plow to lift the blade up 1/4 inch off the surface. Extra precautions should always be taken after the first snow and last snow of the season, as this is when the material is most prone. Below the loose surface particles, the firm material should be stable to resist erosion and support the intended traffic. If this lower level material incurs damage, you can generally do a small scarification fix. These areas can be repaired by soaking, scarifying with a rake, and compacting using a roller or a hand tamper. The organic lock gel activates each time it comes in contact with water, which allows for the blended aggregate to be physically broken up, reworked, and returned back to its initial state. This self-healing nature allows for a simplified maintenance procedure that leaves no sign of the maintenance itself. For example, if you have to run an irrigation line below your finished pathway, all you need to do is add water, dig the material up, put down your irrigation line, spread the material back in place, then water, and compact it back to new. Areas needing rejuvenation can be dug up, thoroughly mixed with new organic lock, and reinstalled. When material needs to be added in an existing project area, it's best to use a source of the same aggregate you started with, pre-blend it with organic lock, then replace it back for a seamless result. Our detailed architectural specifications are separated into traffic type and border types, and they can all be found on our CAD Details website, as well as our own website at organiclock.com. Anywhere you're looking for a natural-looking, permeable surface that will stand up to traffic, you can think of organic lock. Think of it for high-slope applications, green roof applications, courtyard applications, heritage sites, artistic design. Notice the embedded pieces of natural stone throughout these projects. The organic lock material will firm up around the embedded stone, keeping it in place. Edging options are very much open to interpretation. Some designers prefer a natural bleed, while others prefer a clean line. A few examples of these options are concrete, natural grass, plastic edging, aluminum edging, and wood chips, just to name a few. Other uses for organic lock include accent borders, garden edge barriers, wheelchair traffic, golf cart traffic, foot traffic, vehicular traffic, heavy vehicular traffic, natural parking lots, private residences, creative courtyards, high-profile locations, to low-profile areas off the beaten path. We always recommend taking advantage of local aggregate sources. We also recommend working with a growing number of licensed organic lock dealers across North America to get a pre-blended material that's been tested and approved to the proper standards. In locations where a local dealer is not available, Envirobond will work with your team to obtain a local option. We can also work with our existing dealer network to provide you with additional aggregate options that can be shipped direct to your project location. This concludes our overview webinar. This presentation, as well as any and all additional detailed materials, can be found on our website at organiclock.com. And with that, I'd like to thank you once again for joining me for this presentation. I hope you found it both enlightening and educational. I certainly invite any comments or questions you may have.